Welcome back to Turpentine VC, the podcast where we discuss the art and science of building successful venture firms, VC to VC. In today's episode, I speak with Mischief VC's Lauren Farleigh and Zach Perret, who discuss how they've leveraged their founder experiences to build a differentiated VC firm. Zach is the co-founder and current CEO of Plaid, and Lauren was the founder of Dote Shopping. Up ahead, you'll hear their approach to sourcing deals, supporting founders, and unique firm infrastructure. Please enjoy.
Lauren, Zach, welcome to Turpentine VC. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So, Lauren, let's start with you. For those who are unfamiliar with Mischief, why don't you give a brief background? You have a 30 million fund one. You're now on an 80 million fund two. Why don't you tell the story of how Mischief came together?
Yeah, for sure. Well, Zach and I had known each other for a very long time. We worked together right out of college. I went and started a company. Obviously, Zach started Plaid. I think, while I started my company, I realized that kind of the best people on the cap table were really other founders, folks who had done kind of that 0 to 1 journey. And I think, wanted to pay that forward, started angel investing in 2017, really enjoyed it. I think Zach started angel investing around the same time. We worked on a lot of deals together. And I think, pretty quickly realized that more than just paying it forward, there was really a market opportunity to sort of institutionalize what we were doing. Still a relative rarity, I would say, in venture, and particularly, I think, at the earliest stages to find investors who, have that 0 to 1, like true finding product market fit experience. And so that was really the spirit with which we sort of launched Fund 1 in 2021. And now, have scaled it to Fund 2, have added 2 more partners, both of who embodied that sort of ethos that, really drove us to start it in the first place.
The story I like to tell about the early days of Plaid is, I started the company, I think it was 23 when I started the company. I had an amazing co-founder, also like equally inexperienced as me. I'd worked a year at Bain. I thought I knew everything about the world. It turns out I knew basically nothing about the world. And we were fortunate to have these 2 really early angel investors who had founded like big companies and were also just like they were in it for the grind. Like they loved the building of companies and were willing to take our call on pretty much anything. They worked in a completely different industry than us. They had no idea about financial services, but I could call them to say like, hey, I'm struggling with this hire decision, or I need to fire this person, or I have this crazy situation with a partner. And just the level of input that they gave was transformational to the company. And the inspiration for Mischief is we wanted to build the same thing. It takes, oftentimes it's just one call at a critical inflection point with someone that's been there before, or they can lend the right ear, or they can give you the right advice to meaningfully change the trajectory of the company. And it's not to say we're only there for those moments, but really having someone that has been in the room where it happens to actually call when you find yourself in a very similar room. That was the inspiration for starting the firm.
Lauren, why don't you share more about what you guys invest in or how founders should think about Mischief in the market?
Yeah. I mean, I think, what we invest in at a high level, we're a generalist fund. So we'll do anything that's software. We don't do anything that's capital intensive or holds inventory, but sort of within that bucket, we'll look at everything. We're really more founder driven and talent driven than we are sort of thesis or sector focused. We do pre-seed, seed, leading round. So check size is generally between 1 and 4 million. And I think like the unique advantage is exactly what Zach said, our building experience. And I think that manifests in one, sort of the way that we're able to help companies post investment and, be the bat phone as we call it internally when something, comes up, and hopefully be able to, ask the right questions and, offer advice if it's helpful. And I think second too, just the founder empathy that we're able to have allows us to have a relationship that, I think if you asked our founders, hopefully feels really different than other VCs. I think we all know that like, even in the best case scenario, it's a rocky, bumpy ride. It's not going to be perfect all the time. And so, you can really treat us as a thought partner.
And one thing we were saying offline is that you guys are not doing a ton of capital intensive businesses. We're in an era where companies are raising a ton of money for AI companies or American dynamism companies. Why don't you talk about how you think about capital discipline or what kinds of businesses might not be perfect fits for Mischief?
We are very disciplined and aware of how dilution will impact our returns, especially just given our strategy and fund size and everything else. And so, just try to be really thoughtful about that, number one. And I think number two, we, as we're more talent driven and more founder driven than sector driven, I think we're pretty uniquely not afraid of, sort of going our own way and investing in companies that are a little bit outside of the hype. We certainly invest in a lot of AI companies, a lot of LLM companies, but, we try to just be first principle and invest in kind of solid fundamentals outside of, what everybody's talking about and what prices are getting really high and kind of all of that, which I think sort of leads to the strategy that works for us. There's so many strategies that can work in venture though.
Yeah. Yeah, Zach, we were talking offline about how people driven your investing is and what sourcing looks like for you guys. Why don't you share more about that?
If you think about sourcing, I don't know, in what I think is a somewhat differentiated way. When you look at funds, they have all sorts of sourcing models. They have people that are doing outbound. They have like all sorts of stuff. Ours is like hyper people driven. We're fortunate that each of the four GPs at Mischief has been in Silicon Valley, like working for 15, sometimes more years, and that's generated a pretty massive network. And our thesis is we want to identify the best people that we know and follow them around when they're ready to start a company. Sometimes with our encouragement, sometimes on their own volition. We want to lead the round. We want to be a part of it, and then we want to ask all of the amazing people that we know to introduce us to more and more amazing people. And so we have a couple tools for this, but we do things like if I do say so myself, we host epic dinners, and it's a group of, call it 10, 12 people. It's a structured conversation. Like we're really good on like the timing, get people in, get people out, and you can go really deep in that period of time. And we do a ton of these, and then we ask the people that we invited to one to tell us who to invite to the next, and you end up building the network through this process. And we do a couple of other odd things, like companies send us monthly updates or quarterly updates. We thought we should send companies quarterly updates about what we do. So you can see like a Mischief, like Q1 update, Q2 update, Q3 update. We send it out to our companies and kind of tell them, hey, this is what we're thinking about. These are the resources we're thinking about providing to you. Like, this is the way that we can help. And by the way, if you have any amazing founders, send them our way. And so kind of this like very people-driven approach, it's netted us a really lovely sourcing funnel. And frankly, it's way more fun for us.
Yeah. Sending updates of your firm to your companies is pretty clever. I'm surprised more firms don't do that. That's a great way to be top of mind and sort of keep them in on the action.
We tend to think of operating the fund like we operate a company. So we came into this thinking about we'll take a lot of the best elements of being a founder and apply it to the way that we actually run the fund. This was one that just really seemed obvious, like giving people an update on your progress, inviting them to be a part of it, asking for help when you need help. I don't know, it just felt natural.
Lauren, when you talk about the evolution from Fund 1 to Fund 2, because going from 30 million to 80 million is a big jump in a bunch of different ways. Obviously, it's much more to fundraise for, but also it's a different strategy. You went from participating to lead. So talk about what that transition was like and how you guys decided to make it, because some like Box Group, stays as a firm that participates in perpetuity. Did you guys know you were going to transition eventually to leading, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think when we started the fund, we always had kind of big ambitions, but I think like good founders, we've thought about it as an evolution and, seeking validation sort of along the way. And I think even that Fund 1 at a $30 million fund, our average check size was $200K, which was significantly higher than any of our angel checks. So I think that fund was really about proving that, we clearly had great access to founders. We were able to, wedge a 20K angel check in, but that's not that hard, right? And I think with Fund 1, it was like, okay, well, can we get a 200K check in? Can we deploy, 30 million and not have to sacrifice at all in terms of, quality of founder, quality of company, quality of deal, all of that. And I think pretty quickly, halfway at least through Fund 1, we realized that, that was going really well. We were able to get those checks in. We were really sort of transitioning from being known as angels in the ecosystem to being an actual fund, and started thinking about, what that Fund 2 could look like. And I think, of course, when you're growing your fund, you don't want to, change your return profile. And so, certainly thinking about, okay, can we start leading rounds? And most importantly, can we do that without having to, change the bar in terms of the company that we're investing in? And I think there was one moment where one of our best performing Fund 1 companies came to our holiday party. And after a few drinks, he was like, I wish you guys had led my round. And we all went home that night. We were like, because especially this company, we wish we had led that round. Wow, like we have to make the transition to leading. But it is a really different deal motion. Like I think the types of deals we do now in Fund 2 where we're leading, same quality, same, type of company, but a really different deal motion that we've had to kind of refine and get really sort of up the curb on. I mean, especially just when you meet those companies or when you meet those founders. And we do a lot, as Zach said, to sort of be top of mind and be sort of in front of those founders before they even know that they're a potential founder in some cases. So that's been really fun, honestly. It's been, definitely a new motion, but it's been a blast.
And how do you do that? Is it that you're getting introductions to people who may start companies in the future? Is it that you're sort of, because you guys worked at great companies, you're just tracking who's good, who's likely to maybe start something, or what does that look like?
Do we reveal our secrets, Zach? Or
no? I mean, look, the answer is all the above. Like, I don't think there's not a specific secret on this. Like, being genuinely like interested in people, spending time with people, being in the network, doing the things that we do. So like the emails, the updates, the dinners, the WhatsApp groups that we create with people. Putting this all together, we do spend a lot of time with people before they've founded companies. And we do spend a lot of time in kind of like odd company situations. So actually, like 2 of our investments were spin outs of another company. Both of them, like, we were extremely operationally involved in actually generating the spin out. So, we'd known in one case, we'd known the entrepreneur before. In another case, we'd actually known the parent company before. And, the spin outs were messy and they were hard and they were strange. And I frankly don't think, unless we'd done, a pretty meaningful amount of operating work before, unless we'd done like M&A in the past, we would have known how to do this. I think it's odd for a seed fund of our size to be willing to step in those situations. And then both of these companies, by the way, are going to be like amazing outcomes. And so, I think it's yes, the people driven portion of it, but it's also willing to like get in and do work well before you make the investment to help like the company exist. And frankly, it's really fun for us to get into those weeds.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the best marketing you can do for your next deal is delivering on your promise to founders. And I think, especially how we like to engage, we often are meeting the team around, the founder that we backed. And that's where the next generation of founders comes from, as everybody knows. And we really try to take kind of that long-term view. And, we're definitely not the loudest on Twitter in terms of, VC voices out there, but
do we even have a Twitter account?
We do, but it's pretty silent. But I think because of the sourcing funnel of, almost all of our deals come from other Mischief founders or people that we've worked with in the past, really, it can work for us. So yeah.
To that point, it's like if you were these are, not perfect metaphors, but maybe you guys are playing more of a ground game than like an air game. If you're not, sort of big on social media, obviously you guys are doing, some great press coming on the show and others. But how do you think about, like, does a firm need to have a strong air game as well, or is a great ground game getting great returns, great results for founders and being in great deals kind of what really matters? How do you think about that in terms of marketing of a firm?
I think it's hard to say in general. I mean, there are so many incredibly successful venture firms. I mean, and each has totally different strategies. You think of Benchmark, where they have a website which doesn't say anything, and then you think of another firm that has a website that says everything. And so it's clear that a lot of strategies can be successful. We do appreciate studying other venture firms, but when we think about what works for us, we try to take a first principles mindset. Like, what is the thing that we're the best at? What are the places that we can have, hugely positive impacts? Leveraging the networks that we have, leveraging the operating experience that we have, being really true to that, and then ensuring that the people that need to know about it do know about it. The joke that we make sometimes is, call your VC at 4 p.m. on a Friday in the summer, and are they going to answer you? Are they going to get on a call with you that night? Are they going to be talking to you at 11 p.m. that night? And then, like, you look at our operating experience, that's when problems happen, right? Problems don't happen 9 to 5, Monday through Thursday. Entrepreneurs are up late at night thinking about the things that are like driving them insane. And like oftentimes like that 11 p.m. call, that's actually what makes all the difference. And so for us, like, that's what we're doing. That's how we're thinking. Like, that's when we're awake. That's when we're talking to people. And so if we just continue to be true to that, I think that builds the right style of reputation and relationship with the people that need to know about us.
My take is like, I mean, it's great to have both a good air game and a good ground game, but you have to have a good ground game, right? Like, over time, if you don't have a good ground game, it's going to be hard to have a good air game in the end. So I think to the first principles point, that's definitely the most important thing.
Yeah, you have to have a great product. If you don't have a great product, you can't market it. And if you have a great product, sometimes it can market itself if it's that great.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. There's a growing expense eating into your company's profits. It's your cloud computing bill. You may have gotten a deal to start, but now the spend is sky high and increasing every year. What if you could cut your cloud bill in half and improve performance at the same time? Well, if you act by May 31st, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure can help you do just that. OCI is the next generation cloud designed for every workload, where you can run any application, including any AI projects, faster and more securely for less. In fact, Oracle has a special promotion where you can cut your cloud bill in half when you switch to OCI. The savings are real. On average, OCI costs 50% less for compute, 70% less for storage, and 80% less for networking. Join Modal, Skygames Animation, and today's innovative AI tech companies who upgraded to OCI and saved. Offer only for new US customers with a minimum financial commitment. See if you qualify for half off at oracle.com/turpentine. That's oracle.com/turpentine. Hey everyone, Erik here. In this environment, founders need to become profitable faster and do more with smaller teams, especially when it comes to engineering. That's why Sean Lanahan started Squad, a specialized global talent firm for top engineers that will seamlessly integrate with your org. Squad offers rigorously vetted top 1% talent that will actually work hard for you every day. Their engineers work in your time zone, follow your processes, and use your tools. Squad has front-end engineers excelling in TypeScript, React, and Next.js ready to onboard to your team today. For backend, Squad engineers are experts at Node.js, Python, Java, and a range of other languages and frameworks. While it may cost more than the freelancer on Upwork billing you for 40 hours, but working only 2, Squad offers premium quality at a fraction of the typical cost, without the headache of assessing for skills and culture fit. Squad takes care of sourcing, legal compliance, and local HR for global talent. Increase your velocity without amping up burn. Visit choosesquad.com and mention Turpentine to skip the waitlist.
Say more about the transition from a fundraising perspective. What was it like going from 30 to 80?
I mean, Lauren, you can tell the story about the second fundraise. I will just briefly say the first fundraise, it was too easy. Like it was banana simple. I think we called 4 funds. I think we took three checks. I think that took us 3 weeks to get to like terms.
No deck.
Yeah, it's just like super fast. It was just like it was on the back of an Angel track record, and we were effectively writing like Angel plus size checks, and so it was very straightforward. Fund 2 was less straightforward. Lauren, you should talk about that. You did all the legwork there.
I think the ease of the Fund 1 fundraise, ended up being a weakness because we hadn't developed that muscle, that motion. And then when Fund 2 came, the market was obviously completely different. We were more than doubling fund size. So it was certainly, something that we had to work a little bit harder at. Yeah, I mean, I think it's been really interesting learning what that motion is like, especially compared to raising money for a company. There's things that are really similar, right? Like you make a deck. Well, in the second case, we made a deck. You think about your value proposition, what your unique advantage is, sort of all of that. But for a fund, the process is so much more elongated. It's a landscape of potential capital providers that is infinitely more complex. I think when I raised, for example, my Series A, it was like I went to kind of the 8 usual suspects on Sand Hill Road who did consumer deals, and it was all done in 4 weeks. So yeah, I think this was very different in that way and more opaque and kind of harder to figure out. But we ended up in a really good spot. And I think more importantly, developed sort of that motion and understand, sort of how to do a fundraise, and that'll really help us going forward.
And was your pitch something to the effect of, hey, we're proven entrepreneurs, we have a proven track record, we're in great companies, they say great things about us, back us?
Yeah. Do you want to come fundraise with us? Like you've got it down. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, none of us have professional investing backgrounds. And I think that at first, in our first sort of few meetings, we sort of took for granted, I would say, that LPs would understand sort of the unique access and unique, I think, ability to win with founders sort of in competitive situations or just really high quality sort of deals. And I think we really had to learn how to tell that story in a way that LPs could really, understand, wrap their mind around why this was special. And now I'm like, of course, that makes sense. They're not on the ground the way that we're all on the ground and kind of understand the difference between, somebody who, like Zach, having Zach on the cap table. This is how we really think about being fund managers, which wasn't, something that, especially in Fund One, we had really given a lot of sort of reps to, and is obviously a very important part of institutional investing.
To that point, I think you guys have figured out something that others could figure out too, in the sense of like, if you're an iconic founder or a founder of an iconic company, like Zach is with Plaid, you could probably raise a bunch of money to invest as well. You probably have great access, and because founders want you on their cap table, and you could probably raise a bunch. And founders like angel investing, but often they're busy, and so they could also find they could raise money. Two, they could find an amazing team or find amazing partners who would recognize, one, just want to work with them, recognize that they have an arbitrage in terms of getting on the cap table, as Lauren was describing, but also an arbitrage in raising capital. And so I feel like there should be more types of duos or teams that involve sort of founders who are busy running these iconic companies who could get leverage from a team that's full-time investing.
Yeah, perhaps. I think, we're really fortunate in the way that the model has worked out. And it's been something where it's been a huge win-win for kind of all of us in a lot of senses. Like, speaking personally, spending time with companies at the earliest stage keeps me fresh. It keeps me learning. I get to spend time with companies that are just thinking about like the newest, craziest ideas, be it in fintech maybe, or oftentimes in fields that are adjacent or have good mental models, or AI, for example, like keeps me on the cutting edge of what should Plaid be doing with AI. So staying really close to the early stage, I think, is really helpful for me. But I also don't have time to, I certainly don't have time to lead a deal. I don't have time to even do the level of angel investing that I had been doing before. So in kind of like 2017, 2018, 2019, I've been doing a ton of angel investing. And the upside of angel investing is you get to yes, talk to a lot of companies. The downside of angel investing is that those founders then call you when they're in their worst possible situation. And they don't always have other people to call. And you don't have a lot of infrastructure that you've built around it. And so like you get these like weird calls at crazy hours. And like sometimes a lot of them will stack up. And so I was just like, I was feeling fatigue from the angel portfolio, despite the fact that, yes, all of the companies that I angel invested, like I hope will do incredibly well, and I wanted to be supportive of. There's just a lot of fatigue from doing that personally. And so the concept of partnering up with someone, I mean, Lauren, we've known each other basically since we graduated college. Nate and Dustin are other two GPs I've known for, I think the shortest is 8 years. Like all amazing operators. Dustin basically co-founded Cash App, and I like he was a customer of ours for a really long time, so I spent a ton of time with him. Nate was like this product guru who I tried to hire to Plaid for like 6 years, and he never ended up joining Plaid. And through that, we became friends, and he taught me all about product, and it was amazing. And so having kind of this group of four of us has created the right level of like availability, and also, speaking selfishly, insulation for me. Wherein, if it's a thing that anyone else can help with, which these are all amazing GPs in their own right, then they do help with it. And if it happens to be something that I've seen before, then I can dive in and be really helpful on it. So like one of the examples, I was talking to a company this past week, they have like 3 of their big customers, a really early stage company, 3 of their big customers are all trying to acquire them at the same time. They don't want to sell the business. They want to like somehow make all 3 customers happy and like move on and keep going really fast. And I haven't been in that exact situation, but I've been in similar situations before. And so that's one where I can jump in and help. And then contrast that with, someone else says, hey, I need to hire a head of product. Great. Like there are other GPs that can jump in and help figure out how to hire a head of product. And if I have something unique, I'll add it. But the infrastructure and the collaboration works really well. And then just, again, selfishly, like I don't have much time to spend on it. So I don't do a lot of like the fundraising first meetings. I don't do a lot of the fund admin. So I'm very thankful to the other partners for doing that part for me.
Lauren, how do you think about best leveraging Zach, or even just the concept of someone who's part-time but is able to add a lot of leverage?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely has worked really well, in part because I think of the relationship that all of us really have had with each other for a while. And there's just so much trust. But yeah, I mean, I think we think about just getting the most out of the hours that we get from Zach. We think about, okay, sourcing, winning, in special cases of enablement where, the rest of us, maybe haven't seen what he's seen, and just try to keep it really focused. Like you said, like the fund admin stuff, some of the fundraising, like we'll bring them in kind of at the end, but in terms of kind of the day to day there, that's not the best use of his time. So we just try to be really, I think, thoughtful and strategic. But to your point, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see more funds like this in the future. And I think we're already starting to sort of see that. I think if you think about, as the asset class has matured, more dollars have flown in, like the capital raising part is hard and important, but I think it all comes back to, do you actually have an advantage with founders and with companies? And I think this model clearly does, or that's our perspective. And so, I think we'll see more funds in the future that look like ours. And I really think that, like, in the next 10 to 15 years, when people are talking about how seed has evolved or how early stage has evolved, I think this will be one of the headline stories is folks who have actually been kind of in the founding seat, starting funds, and sort of upsetting the incumbents.
Zach, why don't you say more about the transition from angel to institutional as others potentially consider the trade-offs?
The shift to an institutional model, I mean, we actually debated it quite a lot. The initial conversation that Lauren and I had was, should we just, hey, put our own money together and the two of us just do it completely ourselves? And, Lauren can help with some more logistics and be more or less full-time on it. And then we can kind of just do it without any external institutions. The real thought for us, though, was we wanted to be able to scale it up a little bit. We wanted to be able to do bigger checks, and we wanted to be able to have deeper relationships with the entrepreneurs. So that's why we ended up doing the first fund. And that's actually why we ended up shifting to the lead investing. It wasn't only because we saw the opportunity in the market. It was also because we loved the depth with which we could go with the founders. And so I couldn't be happier about where the fund has landed. But it was definitely kind of an evolutionary process to go through the steps. It tends to work very, very well for us. I think our journey was a unique one, and little by little, we found improvement by improvement, and we've ended up where we are today.
Say more about the firm construction. I'm curious how you guys have thought about companies per portfolio, follow-on strategy, and just to give a little anecdote. At when I was at Village Global, our first fund, originally the majority of our portfolio construction was geared towards follow-on. But then we went through sort of 2021 where companies were getting marked up faster than the progress was sort of demonstrating, and we ended up shifting a majority towards first checks. I think it was like towards first checks. How have you guys thought about first check versus follow-on?
Yeah, it's evolved a bit over time. So in Fund 1, it was no reserve strategy, essentially. I mean, we do recycling. We've done recycling for some follow-on opportunities, but really focused on kind of first check. And I think that was sort of where we were at the time. And even Fund 2 is primarily a first check strategy. We have a small pocket for kind of follow-ons, and we are very aggressive about recycling, probably more aggressive than almost any other fund out there. But yeah, I think, we feel like our unique access is really at the earliest stages. And, that's where we see when we do our fund modeling, it's hard to do follow-ons that aren't dilutive to returns, at least in our opinion. And I think, in the spirit of sort of delivering a unique value proposition, both to LPs who often can't get as much early stages exposure as they want, especially in kind of the current landscape, I think have really focused on kind of first checks as our primary, as where all the primary capital is going.
First checks are more fun.
Yeah, first checks are more fun.
Totally. And how about in terms of ownership? Where have you guys landed there? And are you sort of, some people say, hey, we're not doing anything above this valuation. Some say, hey, we'll do, we're valuation open, but we have to see 100x potential. Where do you guys sort of net out there?
Philosophically, we have a deal box, and Lauren can walk through it. But we also, we want to always be looking at the outliers. We want to always be looking at the unique opportunities. We do seed and pre-seed, but then every now and then we'll look at a Series A, and the bar is higher and the bar is different. But there are very unique cases in which it makes a ton of sense. Again, going back to where we started, it's incredibly people driven. And so if we find an amazing founder, we want to find a way to partner with them, whether in the earliest stage, whether a little bit later, even if we're not able to invest, we still want to be their friend. We still want to be helping them. And so we kind of start with the people and then work back to the opportunity. Lauren, do you want to go through the deal blocks more specifically?
Yeah, I mean, early stage, like, pre-seed, seed, maybe some earlier Series A's we'll look at. But I think, what Zach said is exactly right. I think we have a box and, we know sort of where the market is pricing deals in those stages. But as we always say, rules are not meant to be broken, but are meant to at least be evaluated should there be a unique situation. And I think, our job is to figure out when there's a opportunity to potentially, go outside of that. And so, but yeah, I think that's sort of the art of especially early stage investing, is knowing kind of when to break your own rules and deal box. But I think, we have sort of a framework in place so that it's harder to do that. And we're not just, willy-nilly, getting outside of that. So
we talked about fund one, we talked about fund two. How do you guys think about the future for Mischief? Because a lot of firms who've demonstrated success, like you guys have their option of, some say, hey, we're going to stay at this 80 to 100, founder collective or first round, a bit bigger, stay in the sort of seed game. Others say, okay, we're going to go to A, but we're going to stay, reasonably small, like a USV or benchmark, we're going to stay disciplined. It's sort of 400 or wherever they're at now. And then some say, you know what, we want to go big, like A16Z or General Catalyst or Thrive, and be able to play at every stage and be able to have a fee base that can justify, having a big and meaningful team. And they're just kind of, they have different costs of capital. They're kind of playing somewhat of a different game. When you guys think about the future, obviously you're taking it step by step, like you mentioned, Lauren, but how do you think about which you might prefer to be?
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think we're taking it step by step. Right now we have 4 GPs on an $80 million fund. There's a lot of solo GPs on an $80 million fund. I think we feel, definitely capital constrained, which isn't a bad thing right now, just given the amount of GP sort of per dollar we have to allocate. So I think, we'll almost certainly grow a bit. I think our back to the first principles thing, we never want to be in a situation where we have too much capital and we don't know where we're going to put it. We don't want to be doing a ton of outbound or, just over our skis in that way. And I think you'll see us stay really true to sort of what we think we can responsibly invest or invest with sort of the return profile that, our LPs want to see and most importantly, what we want to see. But I do think that means growing a bit, just because I think we want to be able to offer this product to more founders, and we, certainly have, I think, the capacity to do so.
We're right now in a very capital constrained environment or we specifically the fund, where we're walking away from way too many deals that we really should be doing. So I think growing a bit makes sense, but we love the space. We love the model of getting to know people a lot. We love, the stage of company that we get to invest in. Frankly, I love the size of our team. Maybe we'll grow the team a little bit, but it'd be really hard pressed for us to do it. So, growing the capital base, yeah, a bit, but staying fairly true to where we came from.
Yeah, it is interesting. I had a friend who his strategy is co-investing with other multi-stage firms. I guess he himself has somewhat become a multi-stage firm, but it's interesting because his sort of take was that if you look at a lot of the great seed deals over the last 20 years, a lot of them were actually done by multi-stage firms or firms that have become multi-stage since. Now, obviously, Founder Collective, First Round, or other firms have done amazingly well, and First Round did Uber and stuff like that. So there's a lot of counter examples, but it is interesting. I'm curious how you think about sort of multi-stage, either for yourselves or just the phenomenon of, because multi-stage, because sort of the trade-off is sort of signaling risk. Do you have time to focus on it? Stuff like that. But then there's also, they can be less sort of valuation sensitive. They can put more capital, and they have more resources to sort of pitch themselves to entrepreneurs. So how do you think about that?
As you said, there's advantages. I think especially we see sometimes first time founders or less experienced founders really want and potentially really need that brand for kind of recruiting, et cetera. But I think that, as Zach said, like it's really important to us that the founders that we invest in get our attention, get our care, that we deliver on that promise every single time. And I think that we're able to do that just because of the model. I mean, it's just a totally different strategy than what multi-stage has to offer. And, as a founder, I do think the signaling risk is very real. So I think that, that's definitely something that early stage founders should think about. But, it's always a trade-off.
When you talk more about where you see the asset class going in general, are we sort of bullish on more capital coming in, or do we think it's going to be more constrained environment more broadly? Some people also say, hey, is the asset class going to just bifurcate even further or barbell even further, where the aggregators just keep on getting bigger and bigger, and then there's this kind of like specialization on the earlier stage, but it's kind of like caught in the middle, firms caught in the middle, or maybe in a tough spot, sort of the 500 million to $1 billion, versus the sort of 8 to 10 and on the one side, and then the sort of 50, 100, 150 on the other. How do you think about this?
I'm not sure I'm going to have like a specific prediction on where all this is going to go. One of the things that I'll say is when we're looking at a lot of companies these days, like the capital requirements are far less than they used to be. We've always said this in venture. Had I started Plaid, had we started Plaid in 2002, the capital that we would have been required to like buy our own servers and rack them and run our data center and like that would have been way higher. So the cost to start a company has gone down. Now you're seeing 15-person companies with $20 million of revenue because they're building these new AI tools that are growing incredibly quickly. They're using AI to get a lot of leverage in their cost base. And so I think it's entirely possible that the cost to build a company is going to come way, way, way down. I think what that means is like the rounds in which the companies need money are going to be very different than the rounds in which the companies are just willing to sell a little bit. So like there's like a round in which like you got to really like build a thing, and you need the capital to get off the ground. You got to like pay your AWS bills, pay your OpenAI bills, so on and so forth. And those are the rounds that we focus on. Those are the rounds that the early stage will continue to focus on. And then I think there will always be a lot of late stage capital. At that point, if these companies are profitable or they don't need the capital necessarily to scale operations in the same way, then those are much more financial driven transactions. And I think like the type of person that's going to end up on either side of that divide are very different. I think you'll see more operators probably at the early stage. Clearly, you do see more operators acting as angels at the early stage, and at the later stage, it's much more of a financial investor. So I think the firms themselves may well bifurcate even further.
No, that's well articulated. Something you hinted at a little bit earlier is you were mentioning you've built some infrastructure at the firm / plan on building more, and you guys are taking a first principles approach at this. What does that look like for you guys, or besides the GPs? How are you thinking about where is the best place to allocate dollars? Right? Some people are like, oh, we should focus on talent, or other people are like, oh, we should focus on marketing the firm. Or other people are like, oh, we should focus on helping our founders get customers and building a market development team. How are you thinking about where is the best place to allocate dollars?
So the short answer is it's a very active conversation right now. I'm not going to pre-announce anything yet. What I will say is we probably orient less towards marketing of the firm, as you can tell based on my surprise that we had a Twitter handle. But we do place a high value on like building the things that our companies need. Where we actually think of it tends to be a little bit differently. So it's like, what are the repeatable issues that companies have that we can build a kind of product for that helps them kind of like unstick themselves. So like how to recruit. Like I've done a zillion trainings on how to recruit within Plaid. I spend a lot of my time on recruiting. I love recruiting. I think it's one of the most valuable things that a founder can do. I also built a training that I can now go through all the Mischief companies with. So, you're thinking about making your first hire. Like, how do you actually run a good recruiting process? Like, how do you keep a candidate warm? How do you do sourcing? And so it's like, how do we productize these kind of like elements of early stage company building, turn it into something that we can kind of knowledge transfer fairly quickly? And then sure, yeah, of course, we're a sounding board if you have questions on it, but be it recruiting or thinking about complex deal structures or setting up your first sales team, so on and so forth. Like we try to build these like little modules, whether they're mass trainings or they're just one-off calls or they're like docs that we've written, so on and so forth, that can kind of help people get through these things. Like building a product that has product market fit is insanely complex. Like I don't think I can teach anyone how to do that. It's certainly not in a repeatable, predictable way. Building a recruiting team, building a sales engine, like all of those things, like, yeah, they're complex and hard, but like those are the things that actually, you can learn the skills fairly easily. And so we try to think about, what are the things where we can help our founders jump meaningfully ahead by kind of getting out of like by not trying to reinvent the wheel, and like just put all of your effort into inventing your product. But recruiting is not an easy problem, but there are a lot of people that have done it effectively, and we can help teach them that.
We also try to ask them, what would be valuable. We do surveys every 6 months for our founders, where we ask, where could we be helpful, and try to think about where we deploy dollars against that.
That makes sense. Zach, give us a little bit of a preview. What are the most common mistakes you see founders make in recruiting, or where could a little bit of time with you guys change something that the founders are doing about, like, what's low hanging fruit?
Yeah, let's take recruiting specifically. It's not that founders are making mistakes. It's oftentimes that they just have a lot of either indecision or fear doing it themselves. Like I'm a big believer, like in cold sourcing. I think if you ask almost any engineer in Silicon Valley, sometime between the 2014 and 2020, you have an email in your inbox from me saying like, "Hi, I'm Zach, I'm founder of Plaid, and like I'd love to have you come join the company." So I'm a big fan of doing that. But a lot of people have a lot of discomfort sending an email, putting themselves out there, like kind of like making that push. So it's like, all right, how do we get people through the discomfort and into a place where they feel like, all right, well, now I know the tools, the things that I need to do in order to recruit. Or like, how do you refine your company pitch? Like every recruiting call I do, the first 3 minutes are the same. Whether even if you've like worked at the company before and I'm recruiting you as a boomerang, I'm still going to give you the pitch. And the pitch like evolves like little by little, like year by year. But like, how do we hone that pitch? How do you get comfortable saying the same thing? Like at this point, I could like probably just record myself and just play it on these calls. But and so there are some of these basics that if you just kind of do them, it'll make everything way more efficient. Finding the way that like finding the right culture fit for talent. I can't teach anyone that. Like you got to figure that out yourself. But putting yourself out there, like having your pitch honed, like knowing how to make an offer. Like we do things like help with offer letter templates or comp ranges or things like that. Like you're trying to make an offer, like we'll help you figure out the comp for that person. That kind of stuff is all fairly straightforward.
Keith Raboy has a line that he says something like, "If you're not firing anybody you've hired, you're not hiring enough, or you're not hiring fast enough." Like it should be, it's almost like investing where you're taking risks on people, and not everyone's gonna work out. How would you react to that?
I mean, I think philosophically in a company, you should do as good a job as possible hiring. Ideally, you filter out the people that aren't going to be a fit on the way in the door, but you do have to take risks, and your filter process is not perfect. So you end up hiring people that don't work out for one reason or another, and you do have to fire them. Hopefully you can do that in a nice way, and you can do it fairly quickly and in a way that has a respectable outcome for everyone. But that's a part of company building. No one ever bats 100. And like oftentimes roles change. So, someone who was amazing in one role, that role you just don't need anymore. You put them in a new role. It turns out they don't work there. So, this happens a lot. I'd say in early stage companies, the bigger hiring mistakes that we find are people overhire. So, we talk with a lot of founders about like wanting to hire like a head of sales really early. And that is right in a few cases, but in most cases, it's actually better for the founder to figure out how to be the head of sales and kind of like to build. I think of it like the battleship. So like if the founder's the battleship, you have a battle group around them. Like you build all the other pieces that help you sell. So like maybe you have an SDR that's helping you. Maybe you have like a biz ops person that's helping you with it. And so sometimes we find that like these founders will overhire. And then the other big filter is people don't filter as much for culture fit. And they're in such a rush to hire, and they don't think about is this person going to be great to sit beside for 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, and then it doesn't work early. But I think every company has to make some of these mistakes themselves. In as much as from the Mischief perspective, we'd love to help, and like we'd love to have these companies make as few mistakes as possible. The reality is you gotta learn to take your lumps and kind of get through it and come out of it stronger. So, everyone will have these issues.
Yeah. That's well said. Lauren, Zach, this has been a great conversation. For people who want to learn more about Mischief, where can you point them?
Mischief.vc is our website, or you can email us his first name at mischief.vc.
Awesome. Zach, Lauren, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks, Erik.
Thank you for having us.
Turpentine VC is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen and Econ 102. If you liked the episode, please leave a review in the Apple Store or rate us on Spotify.